are a mental case, you 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 are mental, you are a mental case, 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 you are mental. Possibly, we don't know till we talk about it.
Nope.
It might not be mental, it might be a little bit mental. We don't know till we talk about it, so let's talk about it now on the podcast. Let's talk about it now.
Hello and welcome to podcast episode number 3. This week featuring author of the Betamax Theory, Lee Kenny. He's currently living out in New Zealand and they seem to have cracked the lockdown. He's back to work, but he was kind enough to give me a couple of hours of his time to record this week's episode of the podcast. Coming up in part 1, we talk about Christchurch, lockdown, drinking. There's a lot of film chat, and we also do the Simon Pegg anecdote, which I instructed him to tell. In the second half, we'll do all the mental health shiz, and we'll talk about his book at the end as well. So I will get on with the podcast, but I will see you about midway through to check you're all doing okay. All right, see you in a bit. Bye. Bye. Lee, thank you for joining me. Hello.
Thank you very much for having me. Have we started?
We're starting. Yeah, well, that's about as professional. No, this is about as professional as it's going to get. No, and I will not. I will refuse to re-edit it ever.
Good. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good. And where is here? Whereabouts do we find you in the world?
You join me in Christchurch, New Zealand. The time is now it's 11:30 p.m. So we're 11 hours ahead of you.
And how are you finding the lockdown? Well, hang on. No, what is the lockdown? What is the New Zealand situation? Which sounds like a good name for your next book, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that is a good name for the next book, actually. So things here are okay. So New Zealand seems to have handled the situation reasonably well. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, she's rightly, I believe, received a lot of plaudits for the action that she took in, first of all, kind of recognising that there was like this very definite and urgent need to do something. So we went under lockdown quite soon, actually, quite early on, before there'd been any fatalities. So we had this lockdown period.
It was a good idea to do it before the fatalities, right? You know, like, should we wait for the deaths? Should we have the Cheltenham Festival in the UK? Should we have the human petri dish? Or should we just, let's get it home and save some lives?
Yeah, they seem to have acted well here, and people have been reasonably compliant. And so we went from level 4, which was kind of total lockdown, everybody working from home, and it limited the spread of the virus. We then moved down to level 3, which kind of gave us a bit more kind of freedom. You could like leave your neighbourhood, and most people still working at home at that stage. I went back to work a week ago for the first time after 7 weeks at home. So it's good. It's been a strange period. It's been a transition for everyone. But but ultimately the level of cases and fatalities here have been, so there've been 21 deaths in New Zealand.
Is that it? Jesus.
Yeah, so
okay. So
the system was harsh, but it seems to have it seems to have worked reasonably well so far. So you will see kind of. So normality is kind of resuming a little bit here. So we can go to restaurants again. We can go to bars. There are still limitations on the sizes of gatherings and people in your bubble, that kind of stuff. But
what about the sizes of pizza, Lee? Are they limiting sizes of pizza?
I haven't had a pizza, so
sorry?
not that I'm aware.
I'm gonna have to end this podcast. I can't.
Have I had a pizza? I'm trying to think. What? There was definite discussion about pizza, because that was the big thing, wasn't it? After 6, 7, 8 weeks of having to cook your own dinner every night, all anyone really wanted to know was when takeaways are going to reopen. And so I've had a few takeaways, but I can't for the life of me yet think about a pizza. But as far as I know, no official word on pizza restrictions. Thank goodness. I think that would be the final straw, wouldn't it? They can. They can they can impose us, this draconian lockdown upon us. But as soon as they start to mess with that stuff, that's when the people will revolt. So,
yeah, exactly. We're lifting lockdown, but we're going to limit it to small and medium pizzas and only margarita. What the fuck? The Hawaiian clan out there and the meat feast guys, there'd be riots. I mean, you say you haven't had a pizza. I would say my diet has been 90% pizza based. And when I say pizza based, that's not a pun on a pizza base. Either ordered, and because a lot of takeaways are still delivering around here, so I've ordered quite a bit. Or just a big fat Asda pizza. It's been pretty doughy, pretty carby.
Yeah. I've been very bread heavy. Toast, I would say toast. If there's one word that probably sums up the lockdown for me, it would be toast. And although you can't get a pizza delivered, certain things were considered as an essential service. So you could get artisanal bread delivered. And my wife Sarah made sure that there was a constant supply of sourdough bread, of all sorts of fancy bread. So that just kept me in toast, really.
And take this in the way that it's meant, but in my saying that I've ordered a lot of takeaways and you ordering artisan bread, it doesn't sound like we're having the hardest time of some people out there.
We, in a weird way, because of all the things you can get delivered, we've lived like kings, because you can get real ale delivered to your door. You can get your fruit and veg box delivered. You can get your bread delivered. Sarah had Akaroa salmon delivered on 2 occasions. So I mean, these businesses have obviously realised there's a gap in the market for people wanting. What else have you got to spend your money on? Basically, you can't go out.
Yeah,
so you might as well, spend a wad of cash ordering nice food online. That's pretty much what we've done.
Yeah, I've spent it on audio recording equipment, so I can get this stuff done. So the other question, you mentioned real ales there, and it piqued my interest. How's the I don't know drinking your normal drinking standard, but how's the drinking been during lockdown?
It's been a tricky one drinking. So I've tried to limit it to weekends where possible. But then before you know it, it's a Thursday and you fancy one. So it is tricky. I did. So we got a booze delivery. I think that was on a Thursday. These really nice IPAs, and I ploughed into those through caution to the wind, and I was a bit of a mess. I don't know. This sounds really boring to come on a podcast and tell a hangover story, but luckily,
not at all.
I was on a late the next day. I was working 2 till 10. Thank goodness. Otherwise, I don't think I'd been in any fit state. So I have tried to limit the drink during lockdown, but there has been 1 or 2 splurges as well, where I've just gone for it, because it just, it just feels like the rules have changed. So it's hard to know. Yeah.
In the terms of, so this podcast, let me just sort of bring it back to where we are. It's the Mental Case podcast. So it's the whole point was, and not just because of lockdown. I think, for much of my life, I've had multiple sort of mental health issues and all the rest of it, and dealt with it in various ways, whether that be sensible ways like therapy that I'm recently having, and maybe a little bit of low level medication, or not very good ways like, I don't know, drinking to excess, so inadequate coping strategies in later life and all these things that are used. But so I imagine drinking at home has dialed up quite consistently. A lot of podcasts I listen to, a lot of people out there are saying, it's not going great, and they sort of go, ooh, do that sort of British, we're drinking a bit. But I think when normal starts to return, of course, I'm not going to I don't know if you heard that ping. There was a ping there. I don't know if it will get back to normal, because it just naturally will find its level again. And even doing things like this, it's filling the day more than just like, what's next? Have a beer, and that's not ideal, but by any means. But it felt like I was going to go one of 2 ways. I'd either like super fit because I'm out running all the time, or not. And I probably went out running the first 3 nights, and then the next night was a Friday, and then obviously that's not going to happen. Then it was a Saturday, also going to happen again, and that then, despite my best intentions, that then kind of set the tone
Really. That said, I'm drinking. I'm allowed to drink on this podcast. I have a peppermint tea on the go.
Oh, well,
so
drink
that's
away.
so if you hear me slurping, that's what I'm doing.
Drink away. I have a cup of flat white, which I've finally bought some for a machine that has been dormant for, I would say, best part of 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And as happens when you spend 7 weeks in your own home, you go, what the fuck is that in the corner of my kitchen?
Yeah,
it's the coffee machine I once loved, and I cleaned it up, and I apologized to it, and we made it up, we had a little kiss and a cuddle, and I bought some pods, and I'm away.
Nice. I mean, the Breville was the classic, wasn't it? The Breville, your sandwich. Did you call it a Breville in your house?
The Breville, yeah.
And other sandwich makers are available. And but it would be. I think in Space they make a joke about it as well, where they you just gets put to the top of the cupboard and then gets forgotten about for 6 months, and then you'll see it and you'll be, oh yeah, I'll have a toasted cheese sandwich or something. And you get it down and you'll eat nothing but toasted cheese sandwiches for the next 3 weeks, and then you'll put it away again. And so it's just the modern hipster equivalent of the Breville.
It was exactly the reference I was going to go for was Spaced, mate. It was exactly where I was going to go. I can't hear the toasted sandwich maker without thinking of Spaced. And unfortunately, so comedy for me, and I think comedy for you, is an important part of your life. So we've got similar sensibilities. I think before we come on to comedy, and I'll just make a note of that on here, because so we sort of met through friends who also have similar film and comedy sensibilities, and I think we went to see the second Avengers film, I believe, in a little cinema.
Age of Ultron.
Yes. In Age of Ultron, of course it was. I was just waiting for you to. I was going to say the subtitle bit, but I couldn't remember. What's the what's the place that we went to? Evesham, of course.
Yes, that nice little cinema that Steve and Vicky used to go to in Evesham. So they took us there a few times, and then when the Avengers film came out, they said, "Oh, we'll all get together and we'll go and watch it at that nice little cinema, the Regal."
The Regal, yeah.
The Regal. There you go. It's coming back to me now. This is however long, many years ago now. I don't know if I admitted at the time when we went to see that film, but I'd already been to see it on my own, probably on day of release. And I'm not like a massive comic book fan, but I'm fully committed to the Marvel films. I've kind of frustratingly acquired this habit where I've seen them all in the cinema from the Hulk, through the Iron Man series, through all the Phase 1, Phase 2, blah blah blah. I'm slightly inconveniently committed to that now because they're 24, 25 films in.
Which is a frustration.
Yeah.
It's a frustration because what I think I need to see again is a story about how Peter Parker became Spider-Man. I don't think I understand quite how the spider bit him, but I do need to see it recommitted to screen yet again. I think that's really important. Through another actor, someone else up and coming. I mean, fuck my life. I know they've got to renew the rights, right? Because they'll lose the rights, but it's insane. It's insane. And actually, there's been some good iterations of it. Don't get me wrong. I thought Homecoming was pretty good. I liked that.
Yes.
I thought that was probably the best modern retelling, and Tom Holland is great. Has he been got rid of now, Tom Holland?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? So I think I'm not fully up to date, but there was the Marvel, Sony, whatever the issue there was. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, who knows? We may well get. Yeah, you're right. Actor number 4. So that'd be like a 25 year period for actors.
Yeah,
playing the same character. Yeah, rebooted yet again. But I'll still go and watch it. I've been to see the others. So,
well, just in terms of changing the name without confusing the audience too much, they could just hire Tom Hollander instead of Tom Holland, and have the short British 50-year-old actor who played Rev in the role. I don't know if it worked quite, but sort of Spider-Man in his in his dotage.
That's the only way they should go with these things. Like, they talked at one point about doing. I appreciate that was a gag, and I've gone down a serious street. So sorry. You're right. The man playing Rev as Spider-Man would be very funny.
Thank you.
They talked at one point about when Mad Men was kind of at its peak. They talked about John Hamm playing an older Superman, and who's with the absolute perfect casting, like a kind of middle-aged Superman. What would that be like? But talked about, never happened. So
I would like to see that. In fact, I was just before this podcast, I was going to have an espresso in my little Superman
Yeah.
espresso cup because I was obsessed with Superman. We'll get on to mental health in a bit, but it's important just to talk about some shit. So yeah, I am obsessed with Superman and always was. Watched the New Adventures of Superman and all the Dean Cain stuff, all the Christopher Reeve stuff. I actually didn't hate at all. I actually like Superman Returns. I thought Brandon Routh was pretty good in that role. I thought
same. No problem.
I come back to that film quite often. I mean, it's problematic now that Kevin Spacey is Lex Luthor because all I'm thinking about is sexual assault, which puts me off a superhero film. All
the time he was just a supervillain. That was fine. But no, we know. So much more.
When he was planning to drop whatever that kryptonite was in the ocean and create a new super ice world.
Yeah, wasn't it? It was like a real estate plan or something.
It was a real estate plan. It's like at the start of Star Wars when they start talking about trade routes, and you got these 8 and 9 year olds going trade routes. Hang on, let me just. We're going to go all over the place. So let me just come back to Spaced because I will forget this. So Spaced, obviously, very. It's a big thing in my life, and as is Big Train and Simon Pegg and all his films. Can you tell me, absolute crowbar, the Simon Pegg anecdote that you told me the first time we met?
Yes. So I was a huge fan of Spaced when that was first aired. Sarah and I would watch that on a Friday night, and I remember first watching it, and it was just like, oh, this looks like a funny sitcom. Oh, they're funny. They're set in London. He goes on a skateboard, and then there was one episode when his comic book. He sends his comic book to Dark Star Comics, and he's included the picture of the owner of Dark Star Comics that says, "I'm a massive twat." Remember that?
Yes.
So he has to break into Dark Star Comics and then get it back. Yeah. And I was watching this, and there's a moment when the guy who played the head of Dark Star Comics comes out the lift, and they fall on the floor, and they're kind of, I'm doing the actions here, they fall on the floor, and they're kind of like pushing themselves away along the floor, away from the lift, just like Sarah Connor did in Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And it's shot exactly the same way, and I don't know whether I just hadn't noticed or whether I probably hadn't been paying close enough attention, but that was the moment for me when the penny dropped with Spaced, and they were talking about films that I was just obsessed with as well. And you couldn't rewind telly back then, you couldn't pause it. So I'm there to start shouting to Sarah, look, it's that thing from Terminator 2. It's the exact same scene from Terminator 2. And I kind of fell in love with the show at that moment. So a big fan of, I'd never seen any of Big Train, but really loved Spaced and watched it quite obsessively when the DVD finally did come out. Watched Shaun of the Dead, really liked that as well. And then by this stage, I was a journalist working in Birmingham, kind of 2006, when Hot Fuzz was released, and people at work kind of knew that I was like a film fan or something like that. So that they said that I could go to the premiere of Hot Fuzz, which was being held in the Cineworld Cinema on Broad Street, and Edgar Wright, Nick Frost, and Simon Pegg were going to be there. So that was amazing. I was going to get to go into the film, and I kind of thought I might get a glimpse of them. But it was in February, and it snowed really, really heavily. So all of the actual VIPs that were meant to go, who I presume were like Villa players, people off Central News, they didn't turn up because the weather was too bad. It was snowed in. But I did go, and Sarah came along, and we went to the bar, and there was Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and we spent like a good half an hour chatting with them before the film. Then we went and watched the film, and then we came out back into the VIP area. What did you guys think? Nick Frost bought me a drink. I offered to buy him a drink, and he kindly got me one, and it was great. And we had some pictures with him. It was really nice to hang out. I didn't get to speak to Edgar Wright because he has got some family that lived in in Solihull, and they came out, so he was kind of hanging out with them. But yeah, got to speak to them lots, and they had just come back from America, where they'd been hanging out with like George Romero and Quentin Tarantino and all these kind of. So
yeah,
I was pumping them, kind of asking them lots of questions and stuff, and they were great. They're like very, very affable. And then obviously off the back of that, Simon Pegg went kind of, it's kind of supersonic in his career and stuff like that. But yeah, they seemed like great people. Yeah, so it was a very fun meeting. Yeah.
For anyone watching the video version of this on YouTube, you'll notice I didn't smile much during that story once he's got into it, because I'm so fucking jealous of that. as a thing. So that's the way to meet your heroes, right? So there's a number of people that I want to spend some time with in the industry, and actually not be fanboy and tell them that it means a lot and all the rest of it, because I think they probably know that, or quote lines back at them. I just want to have a drink with someone and go, oh, hey, bump into Steve Coogan in a totally normal environment. Spend some time with, I don't know, people that I really like, people like Adam Buxton, Ellis James, John Robbins, all these people. I just want to spend a bit of time with them in a very casual, oh yeah, see you later sort of way. Because when I have met these people, and the two I just mentioned then, Ellis James and John Robbins, who do a really good podcast in the UK, started on Radio X and moved to 5 Live. They've been really good. They talk about mental health a lot on the podcast, and it's been hugely important to me. So when I saw them do an interview at the Soho Theatre, and afterwards in the bar, they were hanging around, you saw them and you thought, and I just walked up and had quite a good conversation with Ellis, who's from Wales, and we spoke about music because I got into a bit of music that he suggested. But with John Robbins, who's harder to talk to anyway, it was just, oh God, love you. So, and I was 4 or 5 pints in at this point. So I'm sure it was just the worst experience for everyone involved. But it's that natural bumping in. And I'm sure you've got their numbers, and I'm sure you're feeding them screenplays every 2 seconds, yeah?
Yeah, we didn't quite get to that stage, sadly, but it felt like
well, maybe
it was about as good an experience as it could have been without becoming lifelong friends off the back of it. And it was all the more ironic that before the film screening, they had done a signing in the old HMV in Birmingham, and where they were signing posters and DVD covers and that kind of stuff. And as I mentioned, it was snowing, so it's freezing cold. And I stood outside to get my Shaun of the Dead poster signed for I don't know how long, and more than an hour, like so cold. Like Sarah went off and got a coffee, and stood in the line. We inched forward, got to the door, got to the desk where the three of them were. How you doing, guys? Nice to meet you. What's your name? Lee. And I was never really that big a fan of Tenacious D, but I believe that they did a song called Lee or something, or there's a chorus that goes Lee, dee, dee, or something like that. So they started singing that song to me. So I got a song from them, and then they signed my Shaun of the Dead poster. But then, cut to an hour later, I was in the bar with them. And I said to Nick Frost, I said, I was in the queue an hour ago. And he said, oh, you needn't have bothered. And I said, well, I didn't know I was going to get to meet you here tonight.
So, for someone who I like, Lee, that story puts me off you massively because of the jealousy is so high in me. I sort of don't want to actually look at you in the eye anymore. So I'm just going to have to cover.
You can be envious without being jealous.
You can, but I find that very, very, very hard to do.
I mentioned my wife Sarah. She's when we first got together, she was training to be a psychiatric nurse. And I'll be totally honest, since she was 20 when we got together, so no one in my family that I knew of really had kind of been affected by mental health issues, or if they had, it just never got spoken about. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until I got together with her and she talked to me about her role as a psychiatric nurse. And I genuinely grew up without any kind of concept of the need for good mental health, or even what the fuck it was. Like we just literally never ever talked about it. And obviously, as you kind of get older, you look back at your family, you can kind of see like evidence of like illness or addiction, or just kind of like bad behavioural practices and that kind of stuff. But at the time, definitely never ever mentioned until so you kind of got together with a psychiatric nurse, and it's been enlightening actually. Like my understanding, we're always learning, aren't we? Like, hopefully we are, and my understanding of and Sarah's now retrained as a cognitive behavioural therapist, and even that's just kind of further pushed my understanding of what it is, what it means, why it's important, and actually why it's even just like in its crudest sense, like of course you'd go and see your doctor if you had a broken arm, but there's still such a stigma about going to see your doctor about a mental health matter, and it's less so. It's definitely less so. I did a series of interviews. So I'm a journalist here in Christchurch, and I did a series of interviews with 5 young people at the end of 2019, just to kind of use them. And they're all brilliant. That they were kind of handpicked because they were like, one was an activist, one was kind of involved with fashion, one was a musician, and then they were all great. And I interviewed them separately, but they all used words they use terms that I, as a young person, never would have ever encountered, like terms like anxiety and probably even depression. I might have kind of heard of depression when I was a teenager, but things like like anxiety and stuff like that. It just never even it was never spoken of when I was a 16, 17 year old. But these young people kind of spoke about this stuff, with real honesty. So perhaps for a generation younger than mine, it is a more open discussion than it was for me. But but it's good. That's why things like this are good. Things like these kind of podcasts, just get people thinking about this kind of stuff a bit more.
So something you said that really interests me. So you said like it wasn't big, you weren't talking about using the terms, but would you say retrospectively, before you met Sarah, you were affected by it, or you had those thoughts, or were you pretty, like, I know it sounds like a bit of a throwaway sentence, but a happy-go-lucky person who didn't really dwell?
Yeah, and I think to some extent I still am. But my father's an alcoholic, so there was definitely that was in our lives. But it was never kind of talked off in the way that it is now, in terms of it being a mental illness, or perhaps the symptom of a mental illness, and things like that. We lost a family member. I guess what would it be to me? Like a second cousin or something like that, which years later I found out he'd kind of taken his own life, which I was about 9 or something when he died. And I think it was never specifically said what happened to this guy. And he was not something that we saw that often, but he was always like really good fun when we were kids at like family parties and Christmas and stuff. And then years later I kind of found out he took his own life, and it was almost kind of like sadder to hear years later that he'd taken his own life than it was to hear in the first instance that he died, if that kind of made sense.
Can I say, it almost feels like, this is me putting a massive value judgment on this, almost feels like a cover-up not to say. Like, to say, oh yeah, he's not around. And yeah, okay, he's taking his own life. It's shit, right? But better to say, it's almost, for me, and this is a personal opinion, and I will say a lot of personal opinions, but it's almost like an insult to that person's memory to not communicate that out.
Yeah, I guess, in that particular example, I think we were just young. We were young kids, and I guess it was just, for whatever reason, it was just kind of too difficult to convey.
Yeah.
What he'd done, but yeah. So I mean, yeah, probably was quite happy-go-lucky, but was kind of aware of this kind of stuff, but it was never. It was. Yeah, you're probably right. It wasn't until kind of later on that you kind of look back and you can. Obviously, I'm no expert at diagnosing anything, but you can certainly see evidence of things that perhaps at the time just felt like just normal life.
Yeah. No, that I think that's really important. That's a really good point to make. It's the when you look back sort of thing, and like you say, the evidence, inverted commas, is you go, oh, wow, that makes a bit of sense, and little things they said or did or whatever. But also, and I'll just say this before I move on to something else, which is, there's two things you mentioned there, and I don't just think seeing the doctor about your broken leg. I think seeing each other about your broken leg. So the analogy, I'm full of fucking mental health analogies that I don't stop banging on about. But if you'd come on camera today with your arm in a cast, that probably would have sidelined the conversation for at least 10 minutes, where I would have gone, Lee, what's happened, mate? What's happened? Another wanking accident?
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've all been there, 7 weeks, and the wanking can get out of hand. I know you've told me about this privately, I mean, off camera before, about how furious it can be, and it can lead to broken wrists, right? But like, we would talk about it for a time, and you tell me it was a skiing accident or whatever, and I'd go, look, Whereas
another skiing accident,
a bloody fourth one this week.
Oh, yeah.
But what I wouldn't know straight away is if your head's broken, because if your head's broken today, I don't know, and the only way to really inquire is to ask questions. So the tips, I want to give tips to people who spend time with people who might have mental health issues and they don't know how to approach it. So there'll be people listening to this who have mental health issues and go, this is really good. Yeah, that's how I feel. And there'll be people going, I have no clue what you're talking about, but I have a family member and I often tread on eggshells or something. Don't tread on eggshells. And also the other thing is, I hate to give that sort of direct advice, but don't tell them how they're feeling. Ask them how they're feeling and listen to the answer. And the answer might not be the answer you want to hear. I've had family members text me during quite a stressful situation, where it has been telling me how I should be feeling and
Right,
admonishing me for doing the wrong thing. Doesn't help when you're in that headspace, I have to say, puts you in the worst headspace. So
Right, yeah.
not ideal, but yeah, so I wouldn't know. And the other thing to say is that for someone who suffers from anxiety and depression, I see it on people like that little fucking kid from The Sixth Sense sees dead people. I see it, like I can see it in people, and not always straight away, but if I spend a little bit of time with them, I'm like, and I've had some nice moments in, there was a moment in a bar about 2 months ago where this guy was going, I don't want to identify him because it's not fair unless they want to be identified, but he's like, yeah, it's been tricky, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. So we said, shoot me down if I'm wrong, but we're talking about depression. He was like, yeah, a bit. I was like, okay, cool. And he was like, and I don't really want to take medication. I was like, oh, are you on fluoxetine? Bit of Prozac? And he went, yeah, 20 milligrams. And we high-fived. And like, it was a nice moment to have another guy who's like in his early 20s go, I don't want to talk about this. This is awkward for me. I'm like, it ain't awkward for me. I'm 34 and it's absolutely fine. And the more not awkward and normalized it becomes, I don't want anyone to ever feel awkward about talking to me about it and ask me any question. I'll just be like, yeah, this is how it is. And it's fine. I started seeing a counsellor, about 10 weeks ago. And my work actually, this is a sign of the times, are actually paying for it. So they offered it because they saw that I was in a bit of a place, and which is really kind. And I've never been in an office with someone, but I do it over Zoom. So I do it over this, and it works really well. I either have the video on or sometimes I'm walking, and just that 50 minutes a week can sometimes happen where not a lot's going on and you just explore other stuff. But sometimes it's been like a whoa, fucking hell of a week. And it's really important. Sorry, windy pops. Just like Johnny Vaughan used to get on The Big Breakfast.
Yes, you did, yes.
The classic reference for anyone.
Yeah.
So it's really good, and they don't presume to tell you how you're feeling, but they do. You sort of say some truths in your head, and what we talked about this week is core beliefs. So like a core belief you've always held that impacts on everything that you do. Whether it's happening or not, and that's, I know, subconscious, you can talk about all this stuff, but those core beliefs that are built up in you in childhood are going to affect you.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether you want to believe it or not, they are every day, every decision. And you can coach that out of you to a certain extent. There's, things like attachment theory and all this sort of stuff. You can change your perception, but it's fucking hard because as humans, we search for patterns, right? And we sort of like the familiarity. So if the familiarity is we fuck up a little bit and we drink a bit too much, we'll probably keep doing that.
Yeah.
Feels comforting. Sorry, I'm therapizing now for no reason, but it's just
no, it's interesting to hear. No, it's and there's all these kind of discussions that so when would it have been when in like the kind of mid to late 80s when EastEnders first started, there was like a famous storyline where a character called Arthur Fowler might not mean anything to anyone, but Arthur Fowler, who was like a good guy. He was like one of the nice ones on the show. He had a mental breakdown, and I'd never heard of that kind of language. I was like 8 or 9, and Arthur Fowler, but there was a joke going around at the time about Arthur being in the loony bin, and I'm sure EastEnders, like, the thought was that this would be a really good way. It's like most successful soap opera in the country or whatever it was at the time, really good way to get people talking about mental health and depression and the pressure that people face. But all I remember from that time is like people making jokes about Arthur being in the loony bin. That was I mean, when was the last time you heard anybody talk about the loony bin? And so that just felt like whatever they tried to achieve with that storyline. I mean, that was certainly my takeaway from it as a kid, was jokes that I perpetuated as well, because they were hilarious, because it's the loony bin, isn't it? It's funny, right? Oh. So and then kind of cut to now, and no show on TV wouldn't feature these things now, and they'd be kind of talked about in a way that it's very open, just like you were, in a way that's very useful and supportive. And there was almost something like, I remember, I was a kid, so I don't remember it that vividly, but like definitely that storyline, there was something like weirdly voyeuristic about it. Like we were kind of getting to see, like in towns, like I grew up in Warsaw in the West Midlands, and like there was a guy there who was kind of famous for just sort of shouting at people and stuff like that in the streets, and
Yeah.
Rumours about what happened. Well, that kind of guy. I mean, looking back, he was probably only 25, and so I'd kind of known about this guy for years, as a teenager going into town, and sometimes you'd see him, sometimes you wouldn't. And again, it wasn't until I started going out with Sarah. And I remember us saying something like, imagine what it took for him to be like that. And it was like that, literally that thought had never crossed my mind up until that point, because I just took stuff quite literally at face value. Like this guy shouting at people in the streets, or this guy, I remember seeing him hit somebody once and stuff like that. So, but just wasn't even like prompted. I didn't have any kind of notion of even trying to gauge what might be the cause or the reason or the context of this person. And that feels different now.
No, I think he sounds mental. No, that's a joke.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean that's what we said. I can even tell you the guy's name, and that's what we used to say. Like it was funny for us as kids. It was funny to see this man shouting and doing this stuff. And that man was probably who the fuck knows? Like, was he in turmoil, or did he love shouting at people? I don't know. But yeah, that was didn't even cross my mind to have any thoughts as to what might have driven that poor man, to be doing that stuff.
No, I know, and I think you can't admonish yourself when and I don't think you are, but as a child, for your reaction to it. And you're right, things like the loony bin, way back when, the madhouse, that sort of thing. Yeah, and even the reason I've called this the Mental Case podcast is because people still go, he's a bit of a mental case. And you're and I used the word mental in myself. One of the early therapy sessions, she went, we don't particularly like that phrase as such. So I'm sort of trying to use it to normalize it, to go, it's not, you can say mental, but you whatever, those characters exist in every town. That will be a common story for most people listening to that, which is the guy who used to walk around, swearing at people, maybe not even drinking, just mumbling to themselves, and you go, oh yeah. And it either becomes a joke thing, or I think as you get older, you become like quite concerned. You're obviously, this sounds awful, but you're concerned for your own safety as well, because you don't know what's going on in people's heads. But also sometimes it is just the talking to those people that might absolutely be the help that they need that day. I know when I felt at my lowest points, being out in society and having everyone around you and no one talking to you is almost like it exacerbates it even worse.
Right. Okay.
And exacerbate means to make things worse.
The adaptability thing, I think, is really important, and I think that usually does stand me in quite good stead. I remember hearing ages and ages ago, I don't know who said it, like change is the only inevitability, and if you kind of accept that, then actually it makes change a lot easier. Because if you're very resistant to change, then life's just a constant fucking battle. Like just constantly fighting change or adjusting to change. Whereas if you kind of accept that it's an inevitability, and dare I say, kind of embrace it and enjoy it, and sometimes even instigate it. So I'm here in New Zealand because Sarah and I, in 2017, quit our jobs. We were both in a kind of situation where I didn't really like what I was working anymore. She was kind of working in mental health. It was kind of hard. She was ready for a break. So we quit our jobs and left. And that was a hard call to make. But part of it was, it was about just throwing it up in the air and seeing where it landed. And right now it's landed quite well for us, but that wasn't always the case. So weirdly, we should actually be back. So I've been in England for nearly 3 years. So since we left in 2017, and we travelled lots, and it was great, just exactly how we wanted it to be. But we should be actually back now in England for 5 weeks for my sister's wedding, which should be this weekend, which is heartbreaking. That's not the case. And she's been very stoic. She's been wonderful about it all. But at the same time, this isn't how it was meant to be. And we've all had to, everyone has had to adjust to, all those plans that we had. We've all had to adjust, and maybe we'll take things a little bit less for granted than we did before. Maybe we'll be a bit more adaptable than we were before as a result of this experience. But,
I'm crossing, for the podcast listeners only, I'm crossing my fingers. I don't know, and I think there's a lot of things being said about we're going to change, hopefully. And by the way, I hate to trample over your sentimentality there, but you do have to, change is very important. And I think if you can't, 1p's, 2p's, 5p's, 10p's, I think change, I keep a lot of change, I keep it in a little jar. And it's very important. I think without change, how are you paying for, the little extra bits? Yeah,
no, that's true. It's true. I used to keep one of those jars, and
did you?
You'd cash it in once every 3 years. Yeah, it was good. It was cool. You take it to the Coinstar down the Asda, and you could make a fortune. Yeah. So, no, I agree.
Sorry, your reaction to my shit. Right, if I'd made that right, I'm going to just explore something very briefly. Like I've got 10 minutes left.
Go on.
If I'd made that joke as soon as you said change, you would have laughed, right? But the countdown clock of joke had started, and I hear this in my head.
Yeah.
It's the 30-second timer, which is saying, oh, it's gone past 15. He's not mentioning change anymore. If you make the joke, it's not really going to work, and it's gone. Then I came back to it, and you went, yeah. I acknowledge that makes sense as a semantic use of the word change. Well done.
Yeah.
But that's not exactly what I was going for. I think I would have got the bigger laugh if I'd interrupted your very serious emotional point. So now I'm annoyed at myself for not doing it, because who cares about Sarah's sister's wedding, really?
I mean, you did the right thing, but morally, I think, but maybe not comedically, and maybe that's something you need to wrestle with. You know, in the pie chart of politeness versus comedy.
Yeah, he had no morals at all, but God, was he funny. Hey, we're just coming up to the last 15 minutes now of the podcast where me and Lee talk about his book, The Betamax Theory, and his upcoming book, which is in draft 1, I believe, Concrete Coloured Skies, which is a thriller that he's writing, so his second novel. And also just wanted to promo next week's show, so with a little bit of an edit, and I think I'm going to put out the Joe Lycett episode next week, so that'll be on the 23rd of June, 24th of June, that'll be going out, so look forward to that, and hopefully Joe can give us a little bit of a push and a bit of promo, and start getting this out into a few more people's ears, but thank you for downloading, for subscribing, for liking, for following on Spotify or however else you're getting this. It's really appreciated that anyone's listening to it at all, if I'm honest. But it's keeping me busy during the lockdown. So thank you very much, and I will see you next week. Bye. I want to talk about your book, and so you published a book. How long ago was that? About 5-6 years ago?
2015. It was published. I wrote most of it though way earlier than that. I first started writing it in about probably 10 years prior, so about 2005. Just wrote it out in a notebook. Sarah and I were backpacking at the time, and we were traveling around Australia, and it was a great time, but we were kind of doing some long drives. We had this camper van, so she would often just be listening to the radio or looking out the window, and I'd be kind of composing like scenes for this novel that I wanted to write, and then as soon as we parked up, I'd jot them down in my notebook. Now, I did eventually type it up and show this to some friends, and kind of did nothing with it really for a long time. It just kind of sat there, and then I moved to London, and 2013, and it felt then that there was a bit of a scene of kind of like a writer's scene, which I kind of got a little bit involved in. I think that kind of gave me the confidence to just to kind of do something with the book finally, really. So I did send it out to agents. I didn't get it signed or anything like that. I got some nice comments back, which I believe is, that in itself is hard enough to get. But it was it was 2015 was like the very start of the kind of the self-publishing revolution, which now is just a phenomenon. Like, there are people that, self-publish as a full-time job. So I put it out, and it did better than I ever could have hoped, really. Like, it sold reasonably well, and it got some nice reviews, and it's got a
4.1 rating on Amazon, I noticed. So
that's nice. I haven't looked in a while, but
not too shabby.
Yeah.
You'll get your Amazon reviewers who would run down the very best of all time on there anyway. So
right? So for some reason, I once looked on Amazon for the for Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. Yeah, and it gets 4 out of 5. And you think, what did people want? Like, it just wasn't. They wanted more. It was good, but it just wasn't quite convincing enough. Or it wasn't. I was really hoping that there'd be some anecdotes.
You've
like,
hit
from
upon
the Beagle. Like,
yeah.
Like, what? Like, why would you take to the internet to review a book that changed the course of human history? And you'd be like, it's just not. Oh, yeah.
It was all right. It was all
All
right.
right.
He had a few original thoughts, pretty good. You know, yeah, it was completely mind blowing and changed everything, but fine. You know, I get the same feeling that sometimes I watch like a drama on TV, which, or you know, when something's really good, like I don't know, I don't even know there's bad reviews for this, but you know, like This Is England, right? They did the drama series of that, and they did each year, and it was I mean, just Stephen Graham, the cast, the music, the score. And I bet there's reviews out there where people go, yeah. And I do sometimes, my common phrase exactly is what you've just said. This is why I laughed a lot. Is like, what do people want? I don't, and I know we're all different and all that shit. I can caveat this until the cows come home, which hopefully they will be home soon. I've let them out for a bit, but they will be home. And I'm like, what do you want from like, I'll tell you what they want. They want Mrs. Brown's Boys, these people. Yeah. And they're welcome to it.
Or there's that kind of thing, like it's because it's not the version that they had in their head. But not being what you would have written doesn't make it wrong. I think, and we've all got opinions. You know, you and I would have discussed films to said cows come home, and you know, and we all think we're right. But yeah. So yeah, even Charles Darwin. You know, if anybody deserves 5 out of 5, you think it would be him. So that helps really as a writer. So
you do know that all writers on their gravestone under the epitaph they have the Amazon review score as well. It says that, so it'll say Lee Kenny, loving husband, good beard, whatever, and then underneath it'll say 4.1 out of 5. Amazon. Yeah.
No, I've never gone on Amazon, so I think you can, because I haven't looked for ages, if I'm honest, but I think you can go on there and you can acknowledge the points made in reviews, so you can go in and you can address things that are said. So that just feels like a can of worms. I think that's what you can do. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that's what you can do.
Yeah, it's to acknowledge your review is another way of saying to argue and go where you've mistaken my absolute great prose is actually my character development was on point. So how dare you?
Can I stop you there and explain what you missed? The point I would most like to say in those reviews is a few of them. So my book's set in North Birmingham.
What's it called, Lee? What's it called?
I haven't even said it right. So it's called the Betamax Theory, and it's like a love letter to Back to the Future. And so it's set in North Birmingham. It's both a love letter to Back to the Future and it's the kind of like an anti Back to the Future. And in Birmingham, it's very common for people to say "mom." M-O-M. Right, so I'm not. I was born in the southeast, so I'd say mum, but people say mum all the time, right? So in my book, I originally wrote mum, M-U-M, and Abby, my brilliant friend that helped edit the book, she said she's not even from Birmingham herself, but she said, "Oh, don't people say mom, M-O-M?" So, good point actually. So it took me ages to go back through that book and change all the mums to moms, and there's a lot in there because the central premise is that this guy works in a supermarket, like I used to once upon a time. It's semi-autobiographical, but it's nearing the anniversary of his dad's death, so he wants to make the grave nice for his mom, and that's kind of the launch pad really for the story. So it says mom a lot, and in several reviews they say, "Why is this author trying to sound American?" I'm saying mom.
Interesting.
And I want to say, well, you've never been to Birmingham, have you?
Well,
but that's what I would say.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that.
No. I think that's important because you read books in the dialect, like Irving Welsh, right? When Train Spotting and Filth, he writes in his dialect because you can't. Apologise to anyone from Glasgow, but you got to put canny because you can't put can't because no guy from Glasgow is going to say fucking you can't do that. They're going to say canny, and that's the way they're going to fucking like. So I watch a lot of Limmy. This guy called Limmy. If you have not checked Limmy, you've
he used to be on Charlie Brooker.
He started Charlie Brooker.
On there,
He's got a Limmy show on Netflix, and he's done. He's basically on Twitch all the time now. And he did a great autobiography where he really talks about mental health and his troubles. Suicidal and all the rest of it. He drank too much, but he just fucking talks about it. Like the way he speaks is so. That voice is like it's infectious, and I think I can just listen accents. Rightly or wrongly, I find an accent is more interesting. Like the content's already good, but also then I'm like, the lilt of that, it's.
I agree. Yes.
Like he doesn't say police; he says the police. Like that was the pullus. I'm like, I had to, and I was like, what the fuck is it? The first time I watched the sketch, I was like, what's the polis?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
whereas mom and mom, I think we're safe there. I don't think anyone's going to be going, what is this mom he's speaking about? What is it? Some sort of regional snack?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, have a look at those reviews. Some people took umbrage with that. It's maybe it's just I don't know, bit of anti-regionalism.
Well,
there you go.
An anti-regionalist agenda. Look, I think if the worst thing that came out of that review is that people didn't like that, I think you probably are in a good stead. As I said, it's a 4.1 out of 5. It's a good read, and I will put in the podcast description a link to it. So if we can get you another 4 or 5 sales from people who listen to this, I mean, that's going to put what, £4 in your pocket?
Easily, and by the time you convert that to New Zealand dollars, you can halve it again. So that's that'd be very. I'd be very grateful. Thank you. That's
a 330ml IPA winging its way straight to the lead.
There was a spell when I was getting like a check. So the first check came through from sales, and I nearly didn't cash it because I thought, this is amazing. Like I've sold some books and I've got a check, and I just wanted to stick it in a frame.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to do that. It was only like 100 quid or something like that, but it's like, this needs to be spent. And then there's a spell when I was kind of getting them on a like semi-regular basis, and it felt amazing. But then that dried up many years ago. It was always nice being contacted by people on Twitter and stuff, like asking questions about the book, and that was wonderful. And I'd answer people as thoroughly as I could and stuff like that. And it was nice. It was like it found its audience. Like it didn't sell a billion or anything like that. But there's are you a Kevin Smith fan?
Yeah.
I don't know. About Chasing Amy and that kind of stuff. Well, she says in that, she says, I sell 3 copies and I feel like John Grisham, and that was my kind of thing. It was, it was like,
mate, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. To have anyone read the words that you've put all that time into and actually get through the whole book is amazing. And then it's like a song, right? If I don't get a lot of likes when I put songs out on YouTube and all this rest of it, whatever. But I sometimes get properly good musicians go, mate, it's good stuff,
nice.
Really nice. And you go, thanks very much. And I don't need it for like affirmation or anything like that.
Yeah.
I will do it with or without an audience. I'll do this with or without an audience. It's not about that. It's the process of talking to someone else, the cathartic process. And I think where mental health, to bring it back to what the subject is this podcast, is really important to have those conversations, to do the stuff that makes you happy. And you sort of get, I would say, I don't know, but 30 seems to be a really big decade for me in terms of the realizations of stuff. The realizations I probably already had in my late 20s, but you're like, okay, yeah, do what makes you happy. Right, yeah. All those times I should have done this before, all those times I should have done music professionally, and now I do a little bit of that for before fucking lockdown ruined all that shit. But playing live to bigger audiences and actually going like, oh shit, I could have done it, but I just didn't. I don't know what it is. And the more you do stuff that you don't enjoy, I'm not saying you have to pay wages. And for anyone who does a job where they go, oh, that's very good to say, but I have to do a job I hate every day. That's fine, but I bet there's stuff in their life that when they get back, it is just purely about them. And to be an auteur and to really just stick to what you think is right, I think is take notes. Like, obviously, I'm sure you had notes from people, like you say, the editor that you gave it to say, maybe do this, don't push back on everything, but stick to what, because the nuance and the individualism is what's going to make that a really interesting piece of work, rather than you trying to sound like, Dan Brown or whoever. I'm not saying you're ever going to sound like Dan Brown, but you know what I mean? That's that sort of thing.
Oh, that's interesting. And I mean, so the first time you and I met it was at one of your gigs, wasn't it? You were playing in Worcester. And
so was that before? Was that before the cinema meeting then?
Yes. That was.
Okay.
Yes. So I'd gone down to Worcester to see the friends you mentioned, Steve and Vicky, and they said, we're going to go along and see this guy, Jack, and saw you at some little venue in Worcester. So that was the first time we met. So in my head, that's kind of, I suppose, that first meeting kind of cemented, like, oh yeah, Jack's the musician. That's kind of, see you, like, obviously you've got lots of other stuff going on.
So you put me in a fucking box, Lee.
Stuck in a box.
You stuck me in a box. He's the musician box. He's probably not happy. He's probably poor.
Well, no, I don't think I'm not. I don't think I have that level of analysis, really. Not that I'm not interested. I just don't naturally have that level of insight. But what was interesting was when you said you were doing this podcast and you wanted to talk about mental health issues and stuff like that. And then you said at the start of this show, so that was slightly, I guess it kind of slightly conflicted with the version of you that I knew quite well, like the guy on stage, knowing you on nights out and stuff like that. It was interesting when, I remember you saying before you can do a podcast. And then when you said recently you can do it on mental health, kind of made sense. But at the same time, that was, it was slightly in conflict with, you as a Jack the Lad, singer, songwriter, musician guy, who's the other kind of, part of the persona that you have. That was interesting.
Yeah. And mate, and I take that, and I think a few friends, like my whole aim with this is to be completely open and honest and just be myself. I think that's the easy, when you're being yourself, when you're just not having to think about the way to phrase stuff. And like even friends I've spoken to about having therapy recently, another friend said to me, who's known me for years, he was like, but you're like really, you're all happy in that. I was like, yeah, I am happy. And I'm not saying like I don't walk around with a fucking cloud over me. That's not to say you don't have some thoughts that you go, oh, no thanks, or some stuff in your past and all the rest of it. So I think, and it's not, what I think I want to be really clear on is that's not putting on an act. I spoke to someone who's going to be on this podcast, the owner of a pub, it's like a takeout pub at the minute they're doing in Worcester called the Arch Rivals. And he said like, it's not an everyday thing. It's not an act. You're not trying to be someone you're not, but you just, you sort of have these, the classic analogy, I'm sure the first to say this, it's like a roller coaster. And when I say roller coaster, what I mean is there's like ups and downs. And this is probably my analogy. I don't think anyone's ever said this. Ups and downs. And at the end of the roller coaster, they give you a little picture of yourself in a key ring, or you can have a bigger blow up picture of that. Yeah,
fridge magnet. I often get the fridge magnet. That's often a nice memento.
But that feels like an original thought that no one's ever picked up on.
It seems to me that you're suggesting that there's lots of ups and downs.
Well, I mean,
is that where you go? I mean, like
that's exactly
if I
right.
That correctly. Wow, goodness. There you go.
I should have actually. There'll probably another disclaimer at the start of this. Not only will it be geeky and there'll be swearing, but there'll be some absolutely world-changing opinions and use of language. People won't know what hit them. But no. And before you go, a chance to plug the new book.
Oh, thank you, but it's way off being plugged. But so I've written the first draft. So I mean, I hope to have it out there in the world sometime soon. But it's a thriller set here in New Zealand. Write what you know. And so it's written. I've enjoyed writing it a lot. It does actually touch upon, a few things we've kind of talked about here as well. Like there's kind of central character is massively struggling with grief and alcoholism and self-harm and things, things I've kind of personally experienced, but kind of, things that are, kind of still very much in the world that, friends and loved ones have experienced. So it touches upon a few of those things we've talked about here. Yeah, who knows when it will come out, but it's I just enjoy writing, really. It's just much you enjoy performing and stuff like that. Like for me, it's the process is the most enjoyable part.
Yes.
Plotting and writing and dialogue and characters and that kind of stuff. And yeah, like I said earlier, if a single person reads it, then that's so a bit early to plug, really. I'll come back on when it's written.
Sarah will have to read it because she's indebted to you. She has to read every bloody word, right? She must love that.
Yeah, I think there was legally required. I'm sure there was something in our marriage vows that legally compels her. Some friends have read it and they've kind of said some nice things. So, but yeah, it's hard to judge stuff, isn't it? When you all I know is I've liked writing it. So
yeah. Do we have a title, Lee? Do we have a title?
We do. Yes, it's called Concrete Coloured Skies.
Nice.
And that's a line from a song by a Kiwi singer called Bic Runga, and it's one of her songs I've taken it from. You're familiar with that or her?
Bic Runga, yes, I am familiar with Bic Runga, but only one song, which I'll put a link in the podcast, which is Sway, which was used in the American Pie.
That's kind of her big side. I saw an interview with her recently-ish where she's from Christchurch in New Zealand, but now she lives in Auckland in a nice house by the beach, and she calls that house the house that Sway built, because that was obviously her huge international hit.
That's great. I love that.
So I'm a huge fan of hers. So the Betamax Theory was very film centric, my first novel, and this book I deliberately don't mention a single film, which is really fucking hard. Like, especially as somebody like myself, perhaps like yourself, who kind of sees the world through the kind of like the prism of cinema. So it's really hard. Sometimes I've gone to write about a film or make a film reference, and I've taken it out because I want it to be very different. But what it does include is kind of like lots of music that I'm sort of passionate about. So that's why that's the title, Concrete Coloured Skies. So it will see the light of day one day, and I'll let you know when.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I'd like to read it, and it's been really good. Thank you for your time, Lee. Having you on, it'll be late there for you now. It's probably 1 a.m. Something like that.
10 to 1. Yes.
10 to 1. Time for bed. And to keep things filmic, and yes. I will boot you off. Well, I'll boot you off at this point. So I think, let me just get this ready so I can do it properly. I'll re-edit this. It's fine. So to keep things filmic, I think I'll have to end the podcast on, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That was Lee Kenny, who joined us from Christchurch in New Zealand. He's got 2 books out, the Betamax Theory, and he also has his new book, Concrete Coloured Skies, which is draft 1. So that'll be coming out soon, and I'll put a link to the podcast description for all the stuff we talked about, any comedians, any clips, anything like that, just to give you some content to get you through this bloody time. So thanks for joining me, and next episode will be out next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. I'll aim to launch it about 8 o'clock, and also the YouTube videos will be out as well. So follow the YouTube channel, please like and subscribe, and any questions you've got that you want for any of the guests, send along to the Mental Case Podcast at gmail.com. I've just realized I barely mentioned the name of the podcast in that entire interview, but who gives a fuck? It's fine. Thank you, and you stay safe, everyone. Love you. Bye.
You are a mental case, 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 you are mental. You are a mental case, 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 you are mental.